Hello guys, welcome to the channel. This is the story about what if Naruto was the Jinchuuriki of 9 Bijuu x Highschool DxD Part 12. Before I start the video, please subscribe the channel for more fanfiction video and please share this video with your friends. This story was written by Havoc Tear. With any more interception, let's start the video. Kyoto Mountain Shrine. Letting out a breath after sealing the door to his bathroom shut, Naruto was swift to activate the privacy seal over the sliding door before he relaxed. Sneaking past a sleeping Haku was not easy, as she is a light sleeper and typically has a metaphorical eye always open. Thus, he was somewhat surprised that he did, but he managed to complete his early morning duties around the shrine without her noticing. Or well, without anyone noticing really. Even his tenants are in the dark about his somewhat cheeky early morning activities, and so it should be a lot of fun come breakfast. But first he needed to shower to get some of the paint and sprinkles from his hair and body before anyone caught him. As the water leaves the shower hose, Naruto let out a small giggle at the shock a few people will be getting when they head towards the dining hall in the morning. It's been so long since he could use his trap-making skills for less harmful purposes. Yes, he means pranking. Running his hands through his loose hair, ruffling it to try get the glitter out that seems to get everywhere as a sign of his rusty skills using it. Normally, he was very precise and never got it on himself. Yet, this time it seems he got more than a few grams of it on himself. Though he suddenly jolted when another set of extra delicate fingers joined his in running through his hair. Glancing back, Naruto spots the figure of thickness given physical form. White-haired that was braided but currently held up by a towel. Her long legs and wide hips and arms were exposed around a towel that secured her bulging, jiggling chest to maintain a form of modesty. The sparkling silver eyes showed her secret mirth at catching him off guard, and so he turned forward again to hide his flushed state but allowed her to help clear up the evidence. Idly though, Naruto double-checks and confirmed that she was very much in the seal whilst also out here at the same time. Reminds him of Katsuyu's ability to be in two places at once. Makes sense, considering they are both slugs and the two have spoken to one another previously. As he sits there, washing out the glitter, paint, and oil, the odd feather, which you shouldn't ask about, he continued to wonder why she came out like this. After a few minutes, and a thorough washout, Saiken wordlessly moved down his back and began to wash it down. Naruto noticed immediately that she was not just using only the soap provided. Some of her own product, he guessed, was being used and can feel her chakra melded into it and the delicate motions she was using. After she washed his back some minutes later, Saiken moved towards his front and bent down, only for him to meet her eyes. He had a towel covering his lower section. It was soaked all the way through, but his modesty needed to be maintained. Staring at one another, eventually Naruto broke it as he asked, "Why?" She smiled sweetly before dropping onto her knees and met his gaze. Saiken replied softly and carefully, but with resolve. "Naruto, you have been our anchor and our hope. I have watched your struggles and your unwavering commitment to our defense. Even when anyone, literally anyone else would have cracked, you kept moving." She took up his hand gently and gracefully as she whispered, It made me realize that I never did give my previous hosts a fair chance. Most did not have a choice, and I took out my rage of my incarceration out on them. We were all at fault." Naruto pressed softly but gained her silver gaze back on him. It was overloaded with regret held back over years of being alone and vengeful. He recognized that look in all the others, but hers, Saiken's, was truly only matched by Kurama. He hated it. His hand moved without conscious thought, and before long, Naruto's hand graced her supple, alabaster skin and gently his thumb wiped away the gathering tear as he whispered, "We have to move forward, Saiken. The mistakes in our pasts can't be changed, but we have to move forward." He smiled softly as he added, "I know that Takata certainly did not blame you for his death nor his life. Those were his choices and not yours. Don't take that on yourself, okay?" Sniffling, Saiken nodded as she leaned into his touch and accepted the hug he brought her into. Inside the seal, the main body of the six tails could feel the warmth of her host, and she smiled into it. Just like him, she needs to move on too. They have all been harping on about it to him, and here she was, thinking about her own mistakes in a past that has already been. Some omnipotent Bijuu she turned out to be. After some time to calm down again, Seiken's fragment outside nodded and her host let her go and pulled back to see her smile, and despite the reddened eyes and cheeks it was still a warm expression. Naruto nodded and smiled back, yet still listened as she asked, "Then, can I make a request?" He nodded, so Seiken pose. "Can I wash your front now?" Blinking owlishly, Naruto's slow look of incredulousness formed at the boldness and ability to switch gears so swiftly that it was amusing for the Bijuu. With a slight smirk, she added with a casual shrug, that definitely was purposeful in assuring he knew that she knew that her chest was soft as it looked. After a moment of that, she pressed with a growing grin. "I have literally seen everything that makes you up, Naru-kun. I have taken care of you medically for years at this point. I am in your head, body, and chakra. Why so bashful now?" Naruto's face fell to blank as he knew that, but still this was different. Somehow it was different, and he knew she knew this, so why is she pushing this? Edging forward, forcing him to lean back from resting on his thighs, Seiken smiled and spoke softly, barely above a whisper. "I am moving forward with this, Naruto-kun. No more regrets, no more holding back, and so, be ready for me too. Am I clear?" Naruto nodded subtly and she nodded back with a smile before leaning back and allowing him to breathe easy again. He was deceived, forgetting that his opponent literally controls how he thinks and reacts better than even his longest-serving tenant, seeing as she has control over his hormone levels at times. Suddenly she snapped forward and captured his lips in a peck, long enough for him to know she did and stiffen. Just long enough to leave an impression on him, as planned, before vanishing back to the seal and regrouping with her main body, while leaving him in a shocked state of disbelief and her used towels at his feet. Score 1 for Seiken. It was at this time that a certain Yukiheim stirred and realized her bed was missing a certain blonde. Snapping up, Haku looks around the empty room and immediately calls upon the pins she left in his hair. Though, she snapped beside her to find them under the pillow. This surprised the Yukiheim as she swore. She interwove them deep into his locks and attached via chakra to make removing them impossible without alerting her. Yet, somehow, he had not only removed them, but did so without waking her. Her husband somehow managed to escape from the bed, her monitoring system, and out of the room without awaking her. She swore she had this place locked down. Blinking at that, Haku supposed that he probably picked up a few things when on the run, so maybe she had underestimated him a bit. Getting up and throwing off the blankets, the second her feet touched the floor, Naruto sensed it and snapped back to reality, his hands leaving his lips and finished washing down his front. By the time Haku reached the dresser, he opened the door from the bathroom and yawned as he dried out his hair, drawing her attention to notice he only had on a towel around his waist. Nodding her approval at his bare chest's fine definition, Haku's Yukiheim side was having a field day with her husband's image. This distracted her from the fact he was still trying to absorb the remaining chakra, a certain 6 tails left all over his back. Naruto knew for a fact she did that on purpose and could feel the smug satisfaction of said slug, knowing she had been found playing her own little trick on him. Haku might actually lose it if she senses it on him, and both parties knew this. Pulling out a change of clothes, Naruto mumbled to himself that after this is all over, he will take her out and so please take her chakra back in. After humming, Seiken eventually did, and so by the time he had dressed in his semi-civilian gear and Haku snapped too, the traces were gone, mostly. Seiken giggled lightly to herself, purposefully leaving that smitten amount on the corner of his lips and curious to see how others would react. She can be a bit naughty sometimes, right? Mess hall. Naruto and his fellow sages were sipping tea calmly among the chaos of the breakfast hall. Though, so was Kuno, who never drinks tea, but for some reason she was sitting beside him and looking all too innocent. Why, you may ask? Well, simply put, someone may or may not have dyed all the hunters' uniforms warning orange. All the devils have bright red hair, professionally dyed and looking fabulous. though Rias has sparkles in hers making it a shiny red, and Kateria's glasses have been replaced with retro ones with lights and stuff. Gabriel explodes in glitter every time she laughs or expands her wings. All the felines have been chasing the red pointer light for the last 10 minutes, though it should be noted that they all have flags on their tails. Kuroka has orange flags on her 2 tail tips. Magashi has a range of colors on her 7, enough to be considered a rainbow, and Kaneko, who somehow is unable to retract her features, was not only dyed red but also has a pink flag on her now exposed tail. Nurarihyun was wearing a clone wig and makeup, and Benamun and Demeter are just stones so damn hard they had not moved in like, the entire time. No one even knows how the hell you get a goddess baked, but she is and fully committed to it. The Yukai staff were not spared either. Whenever they stop moving for some reason, they slowly begin to fade into the background, literally, fading from sight, and so they are all making slight movements like bouncing subtly on their toes, or shifting their arms constantly. It was hilarious, and no matter how many clothes they change, it still happens. The church's exorcists refuse to leave their rooms for reasons not known for whatever reason and have requested food to be delivered to them. The now pink-headed Graphia stepped into the hall while leading in 2 new devils, based off their signature at least, both blondes, and were clearly unsure what to make of the spectacle. When Yasaka entered, Sei and Hitomi at her sides, she looked torn between laughing, crying, horrified, and resigned. When her eyes landed on the sages, that were casually talking and sipping tea calmly, with Kuno with them, every instinct told her they had something to do with this but had no proof. Even when she glared at Narian, when he eventually took notice of her, he offered a calm smile with no hint of innocence or guilt and just filled with the same calming feeling he has been giving off recently. Yasaka was honestly unsure about her deduction after that. Internally though, Kurama had been busting his gut nonstop since he awoke from his nap and was not alone in that. Dietrich too had not stopped laughing and rolling around. Shukaku has not breathed in like 20 minutes, or made so much as a squeak, and had stopped moving from laughing so much. Matabi materialized a new orange cloak with "Prankster King" written in neon pink on it and draped it over the smirking mental representation of her host and bowed before him dramatically as the others clapped and cheered. Oh yes, the king was back on the throne. With a foxy grin, Naruto raised his head as his eyes part and a glint of prankster madness sparkled in his eyes. He just thought of a few more ideas to test out. Takamagahara following the bellowing laughter and feminine giggles, Amaterasu finds herself reaching the front gate of her palace to find Sasanu, Hachiman, Omoikane, Ebisu, and Inari barely containing their laughter at something. With a raised brow, the sun deity asked the gathering, "May I ask as to what is so humorous?" Glancing over at the newly arrived, Sasanu just burst into a fresh round of laughter which irritated his sister, though Hachiman was able to hold himself back as he looked to her and explained. It seems that the rumors were true. What rumors? Amaterasu asked with brow arched, though it was the ever-elegant, well-endowed, white-furred lady of foxes who responded. Inari exclaimed. That sage, he truly is of prankster heritage. A few more chuckles escaped the vixen's throat, her 3 long, excessively fluffy tails sway around her as she locked her golden eyes upon her leader and added. You should most definitely watch your step, Ama-chan. I might just make him my champion at this rate. With an elegant sigh, Amaterasu replied dismissively. Just clear it with Shinigami, as patron, it is down to him, as most things are. The glint in the harvest goddess's eyes could not be missed as she started to giggle at what happened to those so-called hunters, and how humiliated they were twice in a row. Oh boy, this sage is certainly something. Inari promises herself that her Greek counterpart will never ensnare such a fine man, even if she has to descend herself. Come on, Hachiman, Sasanu. Amaterasu ordered as she moved towards the gate down to the shrine. The 2 called moving after her as they tried to get themselves under control. It was difficult, more so for Sasanu, but they heard their leader, sister, as she spoke. We have to go bear witness to this new weapon our subject is going to forge. Kyoto Mountain Shrine in the garden space, Everyone but the churchgoers, Demeter and Benemune, have gathered. Naruto and his sages are sitting in the shade of the cherry blossoms. Kuno was on his lap, humming a soft tune to herself, while staring at the standing group in the center. Yasaka was joined by her fellow kitsune, Hitomi and Sei, but was gesturing to her side where two new devils stood with the pink-haired devil maid. The Kyuubi then announced. With the conference in a few days, the new devil faction has requested that these two ladies be permitted to attend along with their current party. Kateria, who has finally gotten rid of those damnable glasses, rolled her eyes but remained silent. The sages were rather apathetic about the whole thing. Gabriel clapped rather daintily and smiled, causing another explosion of glitter that sparkled beautifully around her. Rias, though, beamed as she called out, "It's been a while, Seekvera." Seekvera Agaras, a beautiful young woman in her late teens with long, pale greenish blonde hair who wears glasses, for some reason despite being a devil, over her slit pink eyes. She seemed to carry herself as a noblewoman, basically flashy and very uptight with her family crest donning various accessories. Naruto won't say anything about that as most ninja are of similar mindsets. He was no exception as even his current t-shirt has his clan insignia dead center and displayed prominently. Izuna too, even his casual black t-shirt has the Uchiha flag on the short sleeves. With a rather stiff nod at her childhood friend, Seekvera responded calmly. "That it has, Rias. I had heard about your situation and was somewhat curious about what transpired." Rias nodded with a subtle glance toward Menma, who was sitting crossed-legged and relaxed against a tree with the little Kuno on his lap. Her fellow heiress nodded subtly and made a mental note to have a word with him about their current arrangement. All the sages obviously caught this. These devils were nowhere near discreet enough to avoid such expressions, and that didn't really bother them. It isn't like they can force them to speak. Stepping forward gracefully and curtsying, the final new addition to the gathering announced herself. "Well met, everyone. My name is Ravel Phoenix, of House Phoenix. I hope to get on well with you all." Ravel Phoenix, as with most of her race, was considered a conventionally beautiful young girl with dark blue eyes and long blonde hair set into twin-tailed drill-like curls. They were held in place by blue ribbons, though she still had a number of bangs hanging over her forehead and a V-shaped fringe that exposed the bridge of her nose. It was not lost on Naruto, or the sages and Kitsune, that her gaze kept shifting to him and every so often swallowed spit, displaying clear nervousness in his presence. Good, she should leave him alone then, right? Surprisingly, a certain Hichibi stepped forward and announced, "You all may have seen me here yesterday, but allow me to properly introduce myself." Curtsying too, Sei announced, "My name is Sei Marika, clan head of the Kitsune clan, and as you can all see, I am an 8-tailed vixen. I hope to get along with you all." She looked at Narian and smiled softly, getting a very discreet sigh from the sage, who then blinked owlishly and seemed to look beyond her. Seeing this, Sei turned back and there appeared Lady Amaterasu, Lord Hachiman, and Lord Sasanu, the latter of whom was teary-eyed and clutching his side, chuckling softly. When the golden eyes of Sasanu met the blues of Narian's, he gave him a thumbs-up and grin. Naturally, a perfectly innocent smile was returned that fooled none of the Shinto three present, but it served its purpose. After a little prodding, Kuno finally got up and allowed Naruto to do so too, along with Izuna, the two stretching out as they did so. Everyone watched the two sages approach the Shinto gods, with the blonde sage ignoring the devils watching him as he asked, "So, I can make my workshop now, right?" Upon Amaterasu's nod, Naruto grinned and turned to the far end of the garden with everyone else at his back. Taking a few steps forward, matching his breathing as he went, he only held one hand sign, the ram. Internally, he called, "Ready, son?" Clapping his massive hands together, Son Goku reported, "Always Gaki." The sages noticed it immediately, as did the Kitsune, as a strange fiery yet earthy chakra rushed down into the ground. But Aoi, the sage of earth and minerals, saw what was happening in such clarity she audibly gasped at the sight of it. This drew many eyes to her, but she herself was too busy watching as a small, smithy, for lack of a better word, was being molded beneath the ground. She could easily make out the forge, several worktops, an anvil being formed and heated to make it solid metal. Numerous racks for cooling, several chairs and the like forming shortly thereafter. Then the walls and a roof was made with a chimney and smelting oven. Just as it finished up, Aoi muttered, That's amazing. I never thought of using earth techniques like this before." "You know what they say," Naruto replied without opening his eyes, nor turning to address her directly. She finally looked to him as he finished. "Necessity is the mother of innovation or something, right?" Everyone nodded at that as it was true. Though, the more aware of his past knew better than those who were still ignorant of that fact. Lowering that hand sign, Naruto went through a few more before kneeling down and with both hands flat against the grass he ordered, "Molten core." Immediately, before him a box of 6 meters wide, 2 deep, glowed before it suddenly rose up slowly and gently. As it did, it slowly revealed a very basic smithy with half of a shack on one side and an open-air smelting pit beside a metal anvil. There were plenty of metal racks and tables along with an empty basin and trough. Truly it was a small workshop. As it came to a stop at about 2 meters tall, the constructor rose to his feet and immediately moved to add the finishing touches. Placing a hand in the trough, Naruto whispered his jutsu and seals spread to keep the water that would follow both cool and contained. He did the same to the basin, before filling them both with basic water manipulation by condensing it from the air casually and dropping it into both. Next, he filled then ignite the fire pit and ovens. Normally, without this audience, Son Goku would have done this, but it is what it is. Yet before he could ignite it, Izuna appeared and waved him off. Nodding, Naruto moved towards the largest workbench as the Uchiha lit the pit and then the ovens. With a puff of smoke, various blacksmithing tools were laid out and placed in their spots. Rolling up his scroll, Naruto put that scroll back in his pocket and pulled out another, and suddenly his new sword was there. As this was going on, both Hachiman and Sasunu moved in to inspect the small workspace. Everyone had but were also keeping at a safe distance. Revel, upon seeing the ease of which Izuna had breathed incredibly hot flames into the pit, was incredibly interested in his technique. Stepping around the crowd, Yasaka immediately spotted her gifted sword on the rack alongside Narian's other swords and smiled at the sight of it. To her it seems that her gift was not wasted and is now a part of the sage's armory after all. Peeking into the cabin part of the workshop, Amaterasu saw Narian unseal his armor and place it out along with a few more tools upon the workbench in there. Though, he soon stepped back and created a strange clone. It was him but clearly not. Its hair was bright orange-red and eyes solid orange. The two nodded, then split up, and Narian returned outside towards the fire bed. She led him by as he reached Natsuo and asked him, "How's it looking?" Glancing back, Natsuo nodded and explained, "Give it another 11 minutes, though, what about the water?" Pointing to the 2 water features, Narian glanced to them then stated, "They'll be fine. Got my seals in them to keep them at a steady temperature." "I see. It will also seep chakra into the metal," Natsuo commented with a nod that was matched by Narian, who then smirked and remarked, "Heard you guys were expert smiths. Seems it wasn't all just hot air." Snorting, Natsuo replied, "Toolmaking is a detailed art form, perfect for our expertise and uniqueness." Chuckling, Narian nodded as he moved off and offered, "Point taken." As he sat at the work desk, pulling out his mother's blade first, Sasunu whispered to Hachiman, "Maybe we should have called Aim Sumara for this. He'd probably get a kick out of this setup." Nodding, Hachiman replied, "No doubt he is aware of it now, though it is not too late for him to come poke his head in." Though the god of war watched as Narian took apart his mother's blade with practiced ease and inspected it from end to tip, with an experienced eye and the greatest of care, he could respect that as you must respect the tools you use. Seeing this, Kiba Yuta also moved in and watched as the sword was dismantled. Due to his ability, he has never really needed to do this as he can just summon new ones if any of his break. That, however, does not detract from his genuine like of swords, and this was a fascinating thing to witness. Narian suddenly turned back to Natsuo and asked, "You got your sword on you?" Finishing off the temperature tuning, Natsuo pulled out a scroll and tossed it lazily to his fellow sage, just as his eldest son arrived to get a closer look. Deciding to use this as a learning opportunity, he looked to his son and asked, "Tajima, how hot is this right now?" Meanwhile, Narian had unsealed the primary blade of his fellow and placed it down. It was not in a bad way, but he can easily see the damage Benihime caused and caused him to chuckle lightly, getting an irritated father at his back to declare, "It's your damn fault it's so busted." Glancing back, the blonde sage grinned and commented, "Yeah, didn't think I hit it this hard." Scowling, Natsuo muttered, "That's a lie and we both know it." Chuckling as he returned front, Narian noticed the hovering Kiba and pointed to the damaged sections before he spoke. "You see how clean these slashes are?" Kiba nodded, and so he continued, "That is what a katana, in the right hands and with the right style, can do to their enemies. Unlike your Western blades that rely more on impact than outright cutting, a master of the katana blade can sever most things." Upon the younger blonde's nod, Narian explained, "That being said, with the right techniques and armor, it can be equally nullified too." He began to take apart the weapon, removing the handle, guard, and unscrewing the blade itself as he added, "Though, thanks to chakra and magical techniques, such things are rare, but you must always be aware of the situation to remain effective. It will serve you well and a good habit to keep in mind." Kiba nodded while watching the sage easily tend to this unfamiliar weapon with practiced ease. Though, after a quick glance around the slightly crowded forge, he asked, "How are you going to repair it, Menma? I don't see any material around here." Nodding, Menma was about to respond when Aoi stepped in and presented a few solid balls, handball-sized, of various ores and offered, "Anata, Narian. You need any ores?" Natsuo looked over to his wife, then to Narian, who nodded and explained, "Yeah, gonna need some for this blade. Took quite a beating from our spar." Natsuo snorted, while his wife just nodded and handed said husband the material. Though, Menma noticed the former dragonholder about to touch the new katana he got from the Shinto and gestured the blonde devil beside him to watch. Kiba followed his gaze and sighed just as the pawn touched it and got burned. His yelp drew eyes of all to him, shaking off his finger, and got many shaking heads from the stupidity of the act. Clearly it is a divine weapon. It may not be a holy sword, but it is just as effective against devils like him. Rias was the one to pull his ear back and muttered, "Issei-kun, divine weapons are just as dangerous to us as holy ones. Please keep that in mind." With the pawn successfully dealt with, Natsuo pushed his son and nodded. Thus, little Tajima announced, "Fire is ready." "Thanks, Tajima-chan," Menma replied as he got up from his stool at the workbench holding Natsuo's blade and stepping past the devil who was watching. Just as he retrieved the katana of night and day, his clone came out from the small, shed compartment holding a small matte gray ingot and commented, "Got the spare ingot." All eyes locked onto the mysterious metal in the hand of the weird clone. The mythical sage's metal to the masses, but to the Bijuu and his host, they've dubbed it Bijuu metal as only the four tails can make it. Narian looked to Natsuo and asked, "How hot is that fireplace?" "About 900 at the moment. You need more?" Natsuo reported, then asked, his black hair tied back by a white cloth whilst many others had stood far clearer. Artemis was paying rapt attention to this exchange and also inspected the metal square in the clone's hands. After a few moments of thought, Narian got a nod from his friend and replied, "Get it to 110. Gonna need it really malleable for the work we have to do today." With both brows in his hairline, Natsuo nodded as he whispered and commented, "That stuff's no joke, huh? Give us another 7 minutes. This is when Revel Phoenix stepped up, still completely calm and unbothered by the rising heat levels, and asked, "Perhaps I can render assistance?" This drew the eyes of the sages, though only Natsuo's remained beyond a brief glance as he asked, "Trust me, little girl. This is out of your league. This kind of fine control is an art and not strictly overwhelming power. With a clearly practiced smile, Revel responded, I am of the Phoenix House. All flames are within our domain. The one the devils know as Menma snorted, then chuckled lowly as Natsuo looked outright offended at that same thought. The cheek on display is making him contemplate blasting this devil with some truly dangerous black flames right now. See just how she handles them. Taking a deep, very deep breath to calm himself, Natsuo spoke slowly and carefully. Girl, you really need to get your facts together and straight, as that statement is damn right disrespectful. Narian and Amaterasu both nodded in agreement, the former for the fire breathers. He is a host to an unbasic principle. Such a broad sweeping statement would have gotten you killed back home for the sheer audacity alone. Despite the redness of her cheeks, Revel pressed. I am sorry for being perceived as pretentious, but our pyrokinesis is our strong suit, much like the legendary bird to which our house is named after. Be that as it may be, girl, that does not mean that all flames will listen to you. Natsuo informed sternly before gesturing to his fellow sage. When the young devil followed the gesture, he added, Narian over there has flames that even I cannot hear, and I am a sage of flames. Same with Lady Amaterasu over there, so tell me, what hope do you have against them if I myself can't? After some thought, Revel supposed that could be true, but her control over flames is second to none within her family. It has not failed her yet, but then again, she has not really been out of the underworld all that much, so maybe there are some flames that will not heed her call. That certainly does make sense. Seekvaria commented, stepping into view of the sages behind the young phoenix before meeting the Sage of Fire's gaze, and added, though, it is curious that is the case. Perhaps as a sage, one might assume you are the final stop in regard to your domain. Only idiots or fools believe in total control. Natsuo announced with a wave of his hand, looking back down into the fire pit he is managing. Thankfully, Narian finished off. Nature is not something you lord your command over. It's more a two-way street than anything. You work with it and not order it. Flames aren't really my forte, not like Natsuo, but they are wild and free. I do know, however, that trying to order them around is stupid and a one-way ticket to disaster. Chuckling, Natsuo remarked, didn't think you were so knowledgeable. You wine types are typically too wishy-washy to care much. Shrugging, Narian rebuffed. Wanted to know what my winds could do to fire after all. Need to know that much. This is when Kiba finally noticed that his senpai was standing on the opposite side of the sage to him, staring intensely at the worktop, and drew his eyes back down to see one of the long daggers being tended to. But what caught him off guard was that Menma had his hands open around it and was zapping it with small bolts of lightning. Each time it was zapped, however, small grains of metal seemed to move to the strike zone before another louder zap happened. Akeno whispered, That's amazing. I never knew lightning could be used that way. Again, Menma shrugged without breaking his focus as he replied, most only see the elemental techniques as ways to harm your enemies. They have plenty of utilities in non-combat roles like this arc welding, for instance. Artemis locked in on that and watched as the metal sand flowed over the kunai, the one she battled against last night, and when they filled in the dents, an arc of lightning melted it in perfectly. It was a rather ingenious way of using lightning that she doubts even her father had contemplated. Stepping up, Revel finally seemed to have come to a decision and asked, may I please attempt to learn to what extent my flames can reach? Regarding her critically for a few moments, Natsuo sighed and gestured her to come closer as he informed, let's see what you can do, girl. Stepping up to the fire pit, Revel's fine dress was abruptly changed into something a bit more practical and work-appropriate, in the sense it was like a jumpsuit almost. A fine, noble-looking jumpsuit. As predicted by the Sage of Flames, the little devil's control of flames did nothing to his at all. Though, when she added hers to the mix, she had impressive control over them, however no control over the rest, and she struggled to get the right temperature they were aiming for. It was amusing to watch for the Uchiha, his son, and Amaterasu as this young devil trying to maintain the heat produced by the flames. With a heavy near growl-like sigh, Narian announced. "All right everyone. If you are not working, then step back outside. It's too damn hot in here for all these bodies." Chuckling, many did move away from the workshop, though just as Kiba was moving off, he only then noticed the fact that the divine katana of night and day was in pieces beside the one from Natsuo. Admittedly, he was incredibly curious about it since he witnessed his testing against the ice panels of the Yukiheim. As they all filtered out, Yasaka remained and caught his attention, so he asked, "That reminds me. Where is this upcoming meeting even taking place?" Blinking at that, the Kyuubi was about to answer, but Amaterasu informed. "We were planning on hosting it here. Do you not want to?" Meeting her gaze firmly, Naruto reported, "It's a bit close to be comfortable for us, in all honesty." Glancing to Izuna, he added, "Right." Izuna nodded before he too looked at the sun goddess and commented, "He's right. Perhaps we can build something new. Beyond the boundary." Thinking on that, Amaterasu looked at Yasaka and asked, "Is that possible?" The Kyuubi held a tight expression, but Naruto interjected while distracted working on this new sword. "We could create a building out in the forest. Nearby, but far enough away that we feel comfortable." "You can?" Yasaka asked, and Naruto nodded and offered. "Well yeah, just a basic hall with a single room, and we can get everyone to add magic circles to enable their teleportations. Keep our own safe here in the shrine too." Izuna commented just as his wife finally added the collected material to the fireplace. Aoi nodded, then added, "I would feel a lot better if the cubs remained far, far away from that gathering of so many powerful beings." After a moment of contemplation, the leader of the United Yukai faction nodded. Yasaka informed, "If you would be so kind, we would very much like that." Nodding, Naruto finished his part of the adjustment to his new weapon's handle, having corrected the threads to make a genuine Uzumaki swirl, and stood up as he offered, "In that case, might as well do so now." As he stepped clear of the bench, he summoned another standard shadow clone as he moved out of the shack while he asked, "Aoi, might need a solid base." Nodding, the black bear followed after him with the Kyuubi following swiftly afterwards. As Naruto moved through the garden, all eyes were on him and wondering where he was going. Yasaka called out, "Say, Hitomi. Gather one of each faction who can create magic circles for transfer magics." They didn't need to, as immediately Sikvera and Rias moved to join them, Gabriel too, with Kateria following afterwards. Not wanting to be left out, Artemis led her lieutenant, Felix, and Jenny after them. Sage's clearing. After a short trek through the forest, Naruto led the party towards the clearing. He battled against his fellow sages a quarter down the trail. It was large enough to hold what they were looking to do. Glancing to his side, he asked the black bear, "Okay, Aoi. Gonna need a solid foundation." Smiling with a nod, Aoi stepped clear of the group and began folding her chakra. All watched as she suddenly knelt down and placed both hands on the ground. It took only a second before the ground shifted and lightly rumbled. The next, out from the ground came up a solid gray bedrock base for a large building. It filled out half the clearing. After a moment of that, the black bear glanced back and asked, "Is that okay?" With a swift nod and smirk, Naruto reported, "Yeah, should be. Though, could have made it a bit flashier, ornate even. It isn't really our thing, but..." He shrugged at the end, and she huffed before glancing back at the raised platform, and with a jolt of chakra, an intricate design appeared across the bare rock. It showed a number of animals running around with flowing floral patterns interspersed between them. Chuckling, Naruto nodded and reported, "Expertly done. I never doubted it." "Right, sure." Aoi replied as she stood up, dusting off her hands, then turning back and seeing the shocked expressions of the non-sages. That got her to chuckle, as no doubt Naruto was about to blow their minds, if she had to guess, as she added, "Your turn." Nodding, Naruto took a deep breath as he sat down, taking up his meditative position, and began to gather chakra for a minute. Then abruptly, he went through a number of hand signs slowly and carefully. Once he reached the end, He placed both hands flat on the ground as he whispered. Sage art, one-story shrine. The chakra he released was far greater than last time, though the ground rumbled far more than before, and only Aoi could sense the entire technique. She nodded as the tendrils rose swiftly from far below, knowing full well that the mines were about to be blown. Though, just as the wood was about to break the surface, Artemis too sensed the growing of multiple trees and her eyes widened. Bursting up from the four corners of the platform were thick tendrils of solid wood that rose up 2 meters, then more tendrils reached out towards the other pillars. Over the next 2 minutes they all watched as a Shinto-esque building slowly formed before them and filled out. The final parts that formed was the front torii gate and the small second-floor roof. They all were broken from their stunned stasis when Naruto let out a heavy sigh, then muttered. That was tiring. Turned out well though. Aoi responded, glancing to him, and he finally opened his eyes and sighed again. Looking over the new structure, Naruto nodded and replied. Yeah, though, I could only imagine one of my own structures, which is why it looks different than the local ones. The black bear offered him a hand, to which he took, and she pulled him to his feet as she offered. It works though, so I doubt it will be an issue. Nodding, Naruto then led her towards the front where the torii gate sat, and the others followed after them, all commenting lowly on the feat just performed. Reaching the front, Aoi commented on the blank plate above the door as they headed inside. No insignia? Naruto waved her off and replied. Not my building, so I'll leave it to the yokai or Shinto to figure it out. Stepping into the entrance room, the sages both turned back to face the others, and the one known to most as Narian informed. So, you all should make your magic circles in this room as the entrance. Beyond that opening will be the meeting chamber. He pointed to the opening that looked to hold a double door but was empty at present, and they could all see within was a bare room with the exception of a single large round table in the center. Clearing her stunned state first, Yasaka nodded and reported, We shall retrieve the required furniture immediately. That jolted others into action, and they all started preparing their circles as instructed. Though both sages shared a look and nodded, both confirming that they had sensed the same thing during their performance. Artemis and Yasaka both caught this and were curious about what had them both growing somewhat combative. Both Naruto and Aoi slipped back outside and glanced around at the surrounding forest, with the latter commented, I really wish I had my staff on me, too bad it's still broken, huh? Without taking his eyes off the distance, Naruto chuckled as he replied, In my defense, you were coming at me with full intent. Not exactly my fault. It was a family heirloom too. Aoi reported, and he sighed. Naruto replied, I promised to replace it, and I will. With my workshop built, it should be being worked on as we speak. With a soft sigh, Aoi muttered, Not much use now. Can I borrow a pair of? Suddenly 2 kunai were offered up, and she took them without preamble when they were broken from their conversation by Artemis, who asked, Who's the target? The goddess and her hunters stood beside the 2 sages, staring out in the same direction as Narian reported. They seem to be the human faction again. They're spread out in this forest and are attempting to be discreet. Yasaka appeared on the opposite side of the sages to the goddess and asked, How did they get so close, and how are you detecting them? Chakra blockers. Aoi reported calmly, and Narian nodded, then explained. Normal yokai long-range sensory is based on chakra presence. These guys are moving with chakra-blocking equipment to hide. Plus, you weren't exactly looking for them in this forest, and so you wouldn't have noticed. How many are there? About 200. Aoi commented, glancing to Narian, who nodded then added, Give or take 20. Before they could come up with a plan, a fuzzy wave of static overtook the group, and the yokai all suddenly felt lightheaded. Aoi and Naruto shuddered at the feeling, though both took notice of their chakra was being subdued. Though, with a bit of focus, the black bear sage was able to resist the feeling. With a light growl, Naruto muttered, So, they came prepared, huh? So, it would seem. Aoi replied stiffly, eyes hard as the stone she wielded as an extended part of her body. Narian, Yasaka called carefully, drawing both sages' attention back to the gathering group, and they noticed all the equally subdued yokai, clearly on edge and unsure. She asked, "This area? Some kind of suppression magic targeting chakra?" Naruto confirmed with a nod, getting a frown from the Kyuubi. After a moment, Yasaka nodded and asked, "I can resist it, but Senjutsu is cut off." "Yeah, we know, and likely creating a build-up the longer this field is up," Naruto informed, and getting worried looks from the yokai as finally the devils arrive along with the archangel. The hovering Rias asked, "What seems to be the issue?" "Some stupid heroes are blanketing the area with a chakra suppression magics and creating a bomb beneath our feet." Aoi snipped as she glared in the last direction. She sensed them. The devils and angel were surprised, unable to sense anything, but Artemis shifted uncomfortably as she glanced around at the forest around them, and it felt off. Noticing this, Aoi informed, "What you are probably sensing, goddess of the forest, is the life essence of the surrounding trees being blocked and choking them. If we don't act soon, these trees will start shedding leaves and eventually leading to death." Artemis and her hunters nodded at that, though all got incredibly angry at this development as the foreigner goddess informed, "Then, we shall claim their heads for defiling nature so brazenly." "That's the plan," Naruto informed without looking back at them, but without sage techniques for ranged sensing and unknown number of enemies spread out, scouting would be difficult, though not impossible. Turning inside, the blonde asked, "Say, Chome, up for a chance to spread your wings a bit?" A chuckle from the beast of seven tails followed by a nod. Chome remarked, "Should be glorious. Go, little Naruto. Claim the skies." The two bump fist to claw, and Naruto's eyes change immediately as he grins up at the rhinoceros beetle. Externally though, Naruto glanced to the group and spoke, "Okay, we need to cover as much ground and eliminate all the heroes as swiftly as possible. Who has working tracking skills?" Only the hunters and Kateria rose their hands, though Sikvaria informed, "My range is limited and they're too far in this case. We do not have their sense," Hitomi informed, drawing the sages to her as she finished. "We could inadvertently track the wrong prey." After a few moments, Naruto ordered, "Devils with me, we'll take the southern third. Artemis and the hunters take the northwestern sector. Aoi will lead the yokai towards the northeastern back toward the shrine. Clear out any that may try attack it during the chaos and alert the others." Raising a hand, Gabriel asked shyly, "What about me?" Blinking for a moment, Naruto didn't really know how best to utilize pure angels, as he hasn't really had much exposure to them. From what he did know, however, was the fact that they were supposedly the good guys and against meaningless violence. After a shrug, he informed her, "Head back to the shrine and spread the word. By the time the others get back, you guys should be ready to move out to aid us too." Nodding as seriously as she could portray without coming off adorable, Gabriel informed, "I won't let you down." Question. Sikvaria spoke up suddenly, drawing all eyes to her and her gesturing to the hovering Rias at her side as she added, "Forest underbrush will be difficult for Rias to maneuver around, and so we are not traveling through the underbrush." Naruto cut her off, drawing all eyes back to him and his cheesy smirk. It was at that moment 6 near translucent green wings unfurled from his back and a stinger appeared trailing down like a tail as he informed, "We will be traveling above it." This also drew eyes to his now orange compound eyes, but as the sage stretched out, he drew their attention to his hands that now had a dark gray, metallic-looking chitin exoskeleton claws over them and up his lower arm to the elbow, but not beyond it. Though as he rolled his shoulder, his tail swayed lightly, Naruto offered as he looked back over his shoulder at them, "Try to keep up." His wings humming broke everyone from their stunned state as he took flight rather gracefully, and Kateria followed shortly thereafter, then Rias and Sikvaria bringing up the rear. Artemis glanced to her hunters, and they all drew their bows and headed off towards the east side to hunt down the human troublemakers. Aoi just rushed off back towards the shrine. The contemplative Yasaka followed with Hitomi and Sei a moment later. All three vixens took note that this was yet another transformation of the sage, but were equally unsure what to make of it. Naruto vs. Heroes Kateria pulled up alongside the now silently flying Narian and asked, "Is there a reason why you split us this way, Narian?" Nodding, as the two heiresses joined his other side, Narian reported, "The strongest signatures are in this direction. Though, as we are dealing with the so-called humans, it means that likely that punk with the light spear is this way, and that leads me to believe that whatever is controlling this field is here too." Kateria nodded, but the three devils tense, recalling that the light weapon in question is overwhelmingly dangerous to them as it is the true Longinus. Obviously, Narian knew this and spoke up. "I am aware of the risk you are all taking by accompanying me here and only really need you guys to catch the stragglers. Though, if you spot whatever is controlling the suppression field and erase it, then I'll mop up the rest." Glancing around and catching sight of various hostiles, he finished, "Do not get caught up in a drawn-out fight. Get in, smash the device, and get out. You can manage that much, right?" "I suppose." Kateria informed with a nod, Sikvera nodded, and Rias informed, "Yeah, should be easy to destroy whatever it is. It's what my power does best." Noted. Narian informed as he pointed out towards the 2 o'clock and ordered, "Blast there for me, Rias. As powerful as you can." Nodding, Rias charged up her destruction magic and flung a blast in that direction, and 5 seconds later the sound of shattering glass rang out. With a grin, Naruto reported, "Good hit. Their defensive barriers toast." "I didn't even see anything," Kateria informed calmly as they speed toward a collection of 3 recently appeared large campsites. All the devil's eyes widen at the nearly 72 humans who suddenly appeared on their senses, though Narian informed, "Stay low, let me take the heat. Strike when you feel you have an opening." Upon that, he suddenly pulled up and away from the treetop level they were at and prepared a move he hadn't used in this world yet. All eyes snapped up at the sound of whining wind and screaming air to a 3-bladed star of white chakra, littered with golden specks. As he reached the pinnacle of his arching climb and became weightless, Naruto folded back his wings as he cocked his hand back and roared out for all to hear. Wind style. Rasenshuriken. The 2-meter-wide sparkling white ball of swirling winds was flung down at the military camp, shredding the air and vibrating the ground it was approaching. As it got halfway between the two parties, a blast of potent light erupted from below and met the attack head-on. The beam hit the Star of Death directly, yet was cut in 2 around it as the spinning star continued advancing, just at half the breakneck speed. The beam also went wide of the sage who threw it and was preparing a second strike. Abruptly, a magical barrier sprung to life and caused the grinding Star of Death to slam into it, grinding away, causing the wall of magic to shudder and break, cracks forming as additional more concentrated barriers were erected in its path. The chafing attack soon destabilized and exploded above the camp, turning the immediate area into a typhoon of hurricane-grade winds that picked up and threw around the unprepared along with anything not bolted down. This only got worse when a second strike landed true and without opposition at one of the neighboring camps, consuming it in a dome of razor-sharp winds and erasing the entire area from the map. An outrage was roared as another potent beam of light shot out from the first camp, assaulted and rushed towards the airborne artillery platform known by most as Narian, who simply dodged such a straightforward attack. Another white ball of wind-based death erupted to life ahead of the hovering sage, though another blast of light caused him to shift enough for him to catch several magic circles that halted his bombardment. For down there were now numerous yokai-like beings and, despite his altitude making him appear as a mere speck. His compound eyes narrowed on the beaten forms of the 5 females. 3 looked like cows perhaps, another a spider of some kind, and the last was definitely a cat yokai. But what made his rage boil to the surface was the clear signs of unwilling usage. Naruto let out a very animalistic growl as the Rasenshuriken faded briefly, before exploding to life, and when his wings folded up, he tossed it at the last auxiliary camp, that had no such captives in, then allowed himself to be caught by gravity. As he free fell, he heard Chome in his head. "Your claws are just like your kunai, but a part of you. Command the wind as you would normally and it will heed your will. Got it. Anything else? There is a genjutsu with wide range that can be used by flapping your wings at a certain frequency. Chomei began, feeding the knowledge directly into his host's mind, and it took a moment for Naruto to understand the concept. After a moment, the blonde reported. A wide range, sensory deprivation field. Useful, but unable to be targeted. He feels his current partner nod in agreement. It was the only downsides of the genjutsu, and in this case, with hostages, it may not be the best. But as the ground closes in, Naruto's eyes catch the grins of the hero's leaders and growled internally. Chomei. We're getting them all out of here, am I clear? We're with you, Naruto boy. All of us. Chomei reported as the others' voices suddenly pick up too, and their growls, hisses, and clicks reach their host in agreement. Nodding, as he reoriented for landing, Naruto's wings flipped out and caught him before landing as to hover just above their tents, blasting dirt in all directions and forcing many to cover their faces. Though the sage took note of the 5 Ukai women, staring back at him in surprise, and their various injuries. Nothing debilitating, but they looked partially malnourished, and their chakra signals are subdued. Likely another type of sealing in play. Not really a problem for him to handle, and so, he looks back to the smug-looking spearman who bellowed. Now that I have your attention, oh dear sage. Just then, Naruto darted aside from the lunging dragon dude from last time, as if an afterthought and with little effort. As the silver dragon armored guy slid to a stop, the stinger tail deflected the sword slash at his back and then forced the blonde swordsman back or face impelling. Naruto lifted up and avoided the monster of a punch from a new guy, then flipped over a rapid slash from a rapier, then he sighed. You really are trash, you know that. Internally though, Naruto realized something and asked his resident Neko. Hey Mata, do you think we can tell that cat to cover her ears using pheromones? You know, cat language? Bobbing her head around, Matabi contemplated it before shaking her head. Unfortunately, not in this form of yours. Trying to recreate it will be difficult and time-consuming in it. Naruto's attention was brought back outside, having zoned out when the spear guy began to do his classic speech, when a very familiar human spoke up. My lord sage. Georg, huh? This is strike 3. Naruto reported calmly, without looking his way, and was still looking at the very nervous man. He did not need to. He had perfect all-around vision and was perceiving things near enough 4 times as fast. It is not the limit, and can go higher, but things get a little disorienting beyond that. Is it not possible for me to what? Disappoint me a 4th time? Naruto cut him off, as they all felt his chakra begin to swell and got ready for a fight. However, he stopped when the spear guy pointed his weapon at the 5 bound and gagged ladies and ordered. Surrender or they die. It took a few moments for Naruto to contemplate his options. He has none of his weapons on him, all currently being tended to by Son Goku back at the shrine, and his 2 remaining backup kunai won't really work with his current claws. The enemy's beam attack is as fast as light and already aimed. As fast as he isn't that fast, so only Haku could pull that off and carry all 5 to safety. Though, he could call their bluff and use his own. He doesn't want to run the risk of harming these 5 innocents. His chains. From here, not fast enough either. Substitution is a possibility, but that would split up the 5 and become a bit of a hassle under fire from so many. He pauses upon seeing one of the heiresses moving at speed. No, time is acting a little funny around her to give her the appearance of moving fast. Neat trick. Pink meets orange and she places a finger across her lips and nodded. Okay, that opens up a few possibilities. Regarding the human leader, Naruto asked, what do you want? Grinning, the man ordered. I want all the sacred gears you have stolen returned immediately. Rising an eyebrow, Naruto replied. Is that it? No, that's just the start. The man informed before pointing his spear at the ground beneath the sage and ordered. Land, now. Blinking at that, Naruto just nodded whilst cackling like an idiot internally at this lucky break. The fool just gave him the means to end his miserable existence, and it would not even look suspicious. Though, for dramatic effect he hesitated. No good looking too eager in this situation. The spear was re-aimed at the hostages, and the man spoke with more force. Land right now. Slowly and with an unnecessary amount of grace, Naruto floated down and carefully landed on the graveled floor. Immediately, he was surrounded by the man's subordinates with the dragon guy reaching for his armored arm but froze. After a few moments, he stepped back. Inside his head, Diedrich spoke up. Albion probably warned him about absorbing your power. It's too bad, as it would have been an amusing sight to watch him detonate himself. The spearman pointed at Georg and ordered, "Place those fancy inscriptions on him like you did the others." Hesitantly, the second in command moved towards the surrounded sage as Arthur reported. "He is completely unarmed. We will have to convince him to tell us where he stashed our stuff." Naruto chuckled lowly, which drew all attention onto him and away from the devil heiress who had just arrived at the captives, unnoticed by all. The spear guy stepped forward as the big guy approached too. The black-haired guy asked, "What's so funny? Do you think you will last against?" "Well, the thing is," Naruto commented airily, despite being held at multiple blade points and angles with now even the strongest sacred gear being aimed at him. His grin suddenly turned foxy as he reported, "I was the distraction." Just then a magic circle appeared around the captives, snapping all eyes to them to see a deviless standing with them. There was a snort from the spear guy who just pointed his spear and fired at them. Yet, unknown chains erupted up and created a dome around them, not even budging from the attack. Confused, all the heroes who were not threatening the sage began unloading attacks upon it, and nothing was seemingly affecting them. None knew who was doing it or where it was coming from, until the White Dragon Emperor smashed into, then off it and stumbled back. Snapping back, the dragon-armored teen shouted, "The signature is mine," Naruto reported, now sensing all 6 ladies were safely back at the hut in the clearing. Just then, his wings flapped hard, but he did not take flight. Instead, everything but him within range of the camp lost their sense of balance, their vision swam, and hearing failed them. Birds fell from the sky. The forest critters began to seize, and every human fell to their knees or flat on their backs. All but one. Chuckling, not that any of the humans could hear, Naruto commented, "Oh, so you can resist this, Dragon Boy?" Barely standing in his armor, clearly putting in a significant amount of effort to do so, the host of the White Dragon replied, How are you?" "Well, I guess this is where you all die now," Naruto reported with a sigh, glancing around at the twitching messes on the floor, and contemplated just upping the technique to full and watch their minds short-circuit. He notices a few are bleeding from their ears and noses already. When he landed back on the dragon gear holder, the sage rose a brow as he took a single shaky step forward, and so he offered, "You have some willpower. Too bad you chose the wrong side." A cough was Naruto's warning to hop back from the blast of light from the true Longinus spear. As he landed gracefully, his wings still thrumming, the sage witnesses the leader of the hero faction leaning on his spear and was clearly delirious. With great effort, he pulled himself up. He wasn't alone, as the bulky gray-haired guy tried to as well, but was swaying heavily and looked like he had vomited blood at one point, yet was trying anyway. Seeing this, Naruto decided to end this now and began to walk towards the towering guy who was the closest to him while he muttered, "Normally, I would give you a second chance, but..." His hand glowed a greenish-orange as he kicked the man onto his back, and then he thrusted his biologically armored hand into the man's chest. The man jerked as he went in, but before he could protest, out came a tennis ball-sized orb of glowing, fiery orange that was immediately sealed into the wrist seal. Moving on, the shield guy, and out came an orb filled with spiraling dark green gases that looked almost like snakes. This is when the dragon-armored teen muttered lowly, Stop. Why would I leave such dangerous things in the hands of troublemakers?" Naruto rebutted as he calmly approached the fair-haired girl next, and like before, he kicked her over before reaching down into her cord, then retrieving the sacred gear of Blade Blacksmith. Who am about to awaken? The dragon guy muttered lowly, but Naruto still heard and immediately, Diedrich barked. Stop him. The heavenly. That's all the dragon armored guy got to as Naruto's fist shattered his armor in a single blow and the teen shot through the tent, skipped and bounced before landing smack into a tree, breathing labored. Immediately after that, Naruto had to duck aside, then deflected the follow-up slash by the true Longinus with the back of his armor and caused him to tut. In order to stop whatever had Diedrich on edge, he had to cancel the wide area genjutsu. Not that it really mattered all that much. Over half the force was dead from the vibrational frequencies he had employed, the rest probably fallen to madness, and only left this delirious creature wielding a god-slaying spear. Roaring out, the hero guy launched forward with a sloppy swing that Naruto deflected with the chitin armor Chome gave him over his lower arm before grabbing the man by his neck with the other. As the hero choked, the sage lifted him off his feet and just used his empathy to peek into any sane part left in his mind. Idly, Naruto realized the swordsman was being tended to by a blonde-haired girl, a late arrival. Though, his current prey had no remorse for his actions, no remorse for sending others to die for his cause. Snorting, this wasn't a cause, it wasn't just, it was just. You make me sick, Sao Sao. Naruto muttered before his spare hand glowed once more and pressed itself against his chest. The dropped spear began to glow too, and for 10 seconds, nothing changed. When the glow faded, the sage regarded this filth for a moment before abruptly jerking his hand and ending the life of Sao Sao. Throwing the body towards the rest of the heroes, Naruto glanced back towards where the dragon guy was, and he was gone too. With a sigh, he muttered, "Another massacre, huh?" Though, he paused for a moment and looked over in a particular direction where the shadows hung deep and the scent of death permeated. Not seeing anything amiss, or any threat from them, Naruto decided to finish this up before that changes. Ruined hero campsite. An amused giggle went unheard by all but her company as Nyx looked to the god of the underworld and asked, "Did I not tell you?" The void black-haired, pale-skinned and black-eyed god of the underworld offered a glance to the primordial of night briefly, his arms crossed and face blank when Hades replied, "That you did, Lady Nyx. He truly is a character." She giggled darkly, as they both looked back out at the cratered camp and watched the Sage of Life start burying the dead by turning over the dirt that dragged the bodies into the earth when Nyx then added, "These fools never stood a chance. They hastened their end when they threatened and preyed on those innocent souls. I shall make sure they all receive the justice for such foul actions." Hades reported with a nod of agreement, thankful that the Shinigami was absent from the domain, currently making him able to redirect these humans to his underworld unnoticed and to the fields of punishment. It was certainly going to be interesting seeing as the reincarnations of his younger brother's children among them again. Though, they might make a stink about it. He won't budge as these ones had allowed such foul, degrading behavior from their supporters, and thus, as commanders, it is their responsibility too. All that is left is for this Sage of Life to end them, seeing as they are incredibly weak at the moment. And as much as he wanted to help them along, the last thing he wants is to provoke the sage, as Nyx too would get mad. So, Hades will wait calmly and watch. He won't do anything. Rias could not believe what she had just seen. The leader of the heroes and their leadership, the strongest of them all, was just wiped out by her former rook Menma with seemingly little effort. His overwhelming force and complete lack of mercy only served to reinforce her job here. To come to a positive understanding with him to prevent him turning on her home and people, in order to have a repeat of this very scenario upon Lilith or even the Gremory estate. Menma's opening attacks were nothing but pure destruction, and even the nearly 24 magical barriers struggled to hold back just one of those spiraling attacks that he threw with casual ease. Rias does recall that their initial misunderstanding, he used a similar attack but with fire. But he never used them in such rapid succession and with such power. She thought it was like an upper-end attack that he would only use in desperate situations and took a lot of power to use. Swallowing nervously, the crippled heiress realized that at best, He considered that attack a mid-rank at best, as he was throwing them around with casual ease. The destructive might just one caused was on par with her brother's heavier attacks, but can create and throw them with far more ease and far less build-up time. Rias realizes she really needs to stop procrastinating now. Yes, she and her peerage have had fun these last few days relaxing and playing around with Menma, but her mission is now far more prevalent than ever before. To build a bridge with Menma and become friends with one another to give her people a fighting chance. Kateria was now certain that allying herself and her house with the sage, with Narian, was the best choice for her after all. The complete annihilation he brought down upon these lower beings was thorough, all-encompassing, one-sided, but most importantly, final. Thanks to her enhanced sensory perception, common among her house, she near enough bore witness to what those spiraling masses of chakra did to a being and the thoroughness of it all. In all her life, Kateria Leviathan had never once seen such eradication on a cellular level before, with the closest being the Baal's power of destruction. Yet, this just seemed far more sanitized, comes to mind. Not as violently overwhelming, but far more surgical in the application of destruction. Nothing was spared from the sheer level of overwhelming power Narian had brought to bear, and certainly has her own mind made up. If forced, she does not want to end up so eviscerated from existence that others forget where she, the last true Leviathan, lay. Perhaps, this also proved that he is no mere human sage too. After all, his ruthlessness was truly remarkable and on par with what one might expect of a Satan. Not those fakers that claim the title, but rather the true sense of the word, as even now she, Kateria Leviathan, felt fear at the prospect of being in his crosshairs. By the Satan, she really hopes that he never uses that technique with his wings on her, as it was rather ingenious but equally as terrifying. Simple wing flapping at a certain frequency was able to deprive his foes of all their senses, then increasing the intensity to level up the vibration to induce widespread ruptured aneurysms of those affected. If Narian Sama ever learns of the frequency requirement for devils, Kateria was brought out of her slowly increasing levels of fear when a panel of ice suddenly appeared beside Narian Sama and outstepped one of the Yukai sages, who looked around. Double-checking she was presentable, Kateria looks over her loose casual wear that she has noticed enabled the sage to be less on edge around her before heading out to meet with him. This action also snapped Rias from her thoughts, and two flew over to meet with Menma and Miyuki. Naruto stood over the unconscious forms of the heroes he suspects are part of the leadership. If left alone, they'll die within minutes, and to be honest, he was of two minds. Excluding the Georg guy, he has only warned the girl and that shield guy once before. Same with that really tall dude, first time meeting him. Then again, on the other hand, they allowed their subordinates to commit such a vile act whilst under their watch and command. Again, his rage boiled up and his still orange eyes became cold. No, let them bleed out for this transgression. Just then an ice mirror appeared off to his side and out stepped Haku, ready for a fight, but a glance around showed that it was already over. Looking back at her husband, who was standing casually with a spear of some kind in hand, that was resting against his shoulder, she stood down and asked, "Why did you not call me?" Shrugging, Naruto reported. Had it in hand. He paused, glancing to his still chitin armored hand, and corrected. Claw, and well, they pissed me off. Frowning, Haku looked around and saw the carnage that remained from the silent camp and asked, "Beside these four, or any?" No, Naruto reported, cutting her off and drawing her gaze back to him, and he added, "Have you tended to the rescued yet?" Rescued? That greenish blonde devil got them out while I distracted them all. Naruto informed, and Haku shook her head, not knowing anything about this. With a tight breath, he informed. They had been held captive by these humans, likely to prevent me from wiping them out with one massive attack from afar. Haku nodded, though can still sense the thick wind chakra laden around the area that suggested they were wrong in their assessment in her husband's capabilities. This is when both Kateria and Rias arrived with them, as he continued. Once she got them out, I used a technique to cripple them and deprive them of their sense of, well, anything. Before Haku could respond, A massive explosion could be heard, followed by a bellowing plume of black smoke and bright flames in the distance toward the shrine, and drew all but Naruto's gaze, his compound eyes catching it despite it being off to his right. His eyebrow twitched as he growled through gritted teeth. That bastard, did he forget he's in a damn forest? Probably. Haku murmured before her eyes landed back on her husband's form and finally noticed the fluttering wings coming from his back. After a moment they settled down and allowed her to see the thin, translucent articles and asked, "You have wings?" This drew the attention of both devils too, with Naruto actually turning to her as he replied, "Yeah, rarely use them, but seeing as Senjutsu is currently blocked and everything." Haku nodded, also feeling it, which reminded Rias of her job here, and began to look around as she asked, "Speaking of, where is?" "Over there." Kateria called out, having spotted a suspicious glowing orb within the wreckage of the main tent and atop a pedestal. All eyes tracked it, and without preamble, the Princess of Ruin proved her magical ability and erased the glowing sphere in one shot. Both sages perk up, feeling the nature chakra flow return to normal, and nod to confirm that their mission was accomplished. Naruto regarded the teen devil and surprised her as he informed, "Good job, Sparkles." Rias was caught off guard for a moment, but then recalled that she still couldn't get the damn glitter out of her hair and pouted. Then again, internally she was happy to help, and even if just a minor thing, got a positive acknowledgement from her former piece. One step closer to her own mission. Naruto then looked to Kateria and nodded, before he offered, "Thanks for the assist too, Kateria. Magic isn't exactly my forte, so I might have overlooked that." Nodding her acceptance, Kateria responded, "Happy to help, Narian-sama." Looking back down and ignoring the honorific usage and what it may suggest, Naruto regarded the dying humans again, then sighed before he muttered, "We should probably save that tall guy, shield guy, and the lady. Give them a chance to improve themselves one last time." Moving without further prompting, Haku knelt before the bulk of a man with gray hair and began to heal his head, and found the blood vessels on the brink of rupturing. Naruto moved to the rapier wielder, and with a clawed hand, healing chakra erupted and only worked on keeping her from dying. Everything else will eventually heal on their own. Curious, Rias asked, "What about the guy with glasses?" "This is his third strike offense," Kateria informed smoothly, regarding the young devil of the new faction sternly. Once her blue met firm purple, the old faction deviless stated firmly, "His death is all but assured due to his own actions." Narian-sama had warned him prior, and yet he did not change, thus no more chances remain. Before Rias could argue, Menma informed, "She is right, Sparkles. First it was on the beach. I let him off with a warning and allowed him to take his men with him. Second was at that school. I confiscated his sacred gear and took out his soldiers." He finally looked at her directly, his piercing orange compound eyes forcing her to swallow as he finished. "This is strike 3. Not only did he interfere with the very essence of nature, but he also allowed his men to abuse the hostages they had taken in an attempt to bring me to heel. I am not one who will tolerate such behavior in the slightest." Rising to his feet, the heroine no longer in danger of death, Naruto ends the conversation. "Georg dies here along with his soldiers. The rest are to be taken into custody and handed over to the Uchiei faction for these crimes. They were the ones most affected by their actions, and as much as I would rather just be done with it, handing them over allows the anger and hatred to be directed to those responsible and not the human race as a whole." Haku and Kateria nod along with his sentiments, though Rias bit her lip, unsure how to feel about this development. It was fair, she supposed. Though, maybe a bit harsh and kinda cold. Then again, it would also allow the Uchiei to get justice too, and not just lash out at the humans who had nothing to do with this. She was broken from her thoughts when Menma stabbed Georg with his stinger tail straight in the chest. It was a swift death. After it was pulled out, the earth itself seemed to swallow his body that would never be seen again, and leaving nothing behind. Moving over to the tallest man, Naruto grabbed the unconscious hero without any effort despite the man's bulking size. Another benefit of this form was he had stupidly enhanced strength as with any insect in relevance to their size, though he ordered, "We're heading back to the new meeting hall. Grab the other two and let's get moving." Haku grabbed the unconscious teen at her feet and Kateria grabbed the girl, both deploying wings which surprised the devils as the Yukiheims were similar to the blondes as they were similarly membrane-thin but were clear as crystal with dark blue veins and sharp-edged. They all took flight shortly afterward with Naruto holding his, captive, by the leg and left him dangling casually as they flew back to the new building. Sage's clearing, new shrine arriving back at the meeting site, Naruto and his group arrived then dropped the still unconscious humans upon the dirt haphazardly and clearly without care. Though, they came across the sight of a pissed-off goddess of the forest. Her hunters too were glaring at the casually standing Sage of Flames. It was expected, in all honesty, that she of all people would be upset at his no doubt liberal use of flames among the trees as he likely had minimal weapons ready seeing as they too were being tended to as well. Didn't make it right, though. Beside the two above-mentioned groups, Gabriel was there alongside Yusaka, Sei, Hitomi and Seikvaria. The angel-devil duo were comforting the rescued and the kitsune were discussing calling in reinforcements along with the decor for the new shrine. Though, Amaterasu exited the building shortly after Naruto had dropped the humans, no doubt inspecting it, and all eyes landed on the newly arrived. A brow arched at this new form of his and she spoke promptly. "Oh, I was not expecting this one." This confirmed it for the vixens that their lady did in fact know that Narian had multiple forms of yukai-like origin. Now though, that leaves the questions of how many, what purpose does each have, and what animals do they represent, but, most importantly, does he have a form in their likeness? Inside the seal, Kurama sneezed drawing his sibling's eyes with many brows arched at the strange phenomena. But Naruto ignored it as he replied to the sun goddess. Well, without senjutsu, needed to move fast and scout in all directions at speed. It wasn't a difficult decision. I suppose it would not be. Amaterasu replied with a soft smile before she gestured to her back at the shrine and remarked. A fine building, by the way, and a perfect venue for the talks. Nodding as he approached, Naruto reported. Aoi and I built it for that singular purpose. Neither of us care for the flashy decorations, so we will leave that to you all. They all nodded to that, which is when Graphia stepped out from the building too, drawing Naruto's cold orange gaze briefly and got her to stiffen slightly, but she did not stop her approach to her charge and asked. Lady Rias, that was a rather reckless action to take in your condition. But, I am sure you had the best of intentions, so I will not report it back to your brother. With a sigh, the now seated heiress to the Gremory house nodded, already knowing that, but it was of critical importance to join the defense of the nature around here. Though, to her surprise, Menma spoke up in her defense. Lucifuge-san. Drawing everyone's attention, including the recently rescued and the lone angel, to the still bug-eyed Naruto, who informed the pink-haired maid. Were it not for the actions of Seikvaria Agaras, in securing the hostages, Rias Gremory, in destroying the enemy's defenses, and Kateria Leviathan, in locating the enemy base, this outcome would have been drastically different. All three have my thanks for their assistance in this matter. That was not exactly wrong either, so Naruto doesn't mind giving credit where it's due, and especially in Seikvaria's actions, which is why he turned to her and added. Especially you, Seikvaria Agaras. Me? Seikvaria asked, and he nodded before he looked over the five recovered and spoke softer. Thanks to your actions, my job was a lot easier to manage. Rescuing the captives and getting them out allowed me to use one of my more powerful techniques and wipe out the enemy force. Your contribution will not be forgotten. The devil heiress nodded while adjusting her glasses, though Yusaka spoke next, just as formally. Indeed, young Seikvaria-san. You have done my people a great service. You have my thanks for your help. With a curtsy, Seikvaria replied. It was no trouble, Lady Yusaka, Menma-san. I just wanted to be of help. Then do me a favor. Naruto asked, drawing her pink-eyed gaze to see his facepalm. Though the other sages present had amusement in their eyes for some reason, Seikvaria asked. If it is within my power. For the love of the log, Stop calling me Menma, Naruto informed crisply, though there was a hint of amusement in his tone. This got risen brows from the devils present, and so, he informed. It was amusing at first, still kinda is, but it makes it really hard to take you seriously when you do, Agara's-san. Then what, Narian, like everyone else? Naruto reported with a casual shrug, though he noted the slight twitch in Yasaka's eyebrow at the lack of real name again, and he chuckled, causing the tick to grow in intensity. With a nod herself, Sekvera responded, "Very well, Narian-san." Everyone nodded when a groan caught the attention of all the non-compound eyes snapping to its source being the tall hero who looked ready to awaken, and Naruto muttered, "You should probably get them to a cell or something, Yasaka-san. They could be a bit of an issue otherwise." Nodding, Yasaka and her kitsune moved forward as she asked, "Why did you spare them and not the others?" "To stand trial, obviously," Naruto replied candidly, causing the Yukai to raise an eyebrow, and so he added smoothly, "Considering they snuck into your homeland, deployed a super dangerous device, and kidnapped your kin. A public trial sounds like it would be in order, would it not?" "Channel the hatred, huh? Smart," Izuna commented with a nod, easily seeing the purpose from such an act. Haku nodded and explained, "It would help stem the hatred. Last thing we want to do is cause a witch hunt." She trailed off softly at the end, her mind sinking into a past that defined her early life before her hand was clasped by the light of that life, even if it was short-lived, and at the end of it. Looking up, Haku was met by a soft smile of her husband. A throat clearing drew attention to Amaterasu, who informed the sage, "With that being as it may, the forest did take a little damage." Immediately, glares are aimed at the fire-obsessed man, who offered a casual shrug. Izuna reported, "What, I got them, didn't I? And half the forest." Artemis growled with a hiss at the end, though he looked completely unfazed and pointed at Naruto. Izuna claimed, "He'll fix it. No big deal." "Damn flamethrower." Naruto muttered lowly, getting a glare from the Uchiha, who snipped, "You spiral sucking." Izuna suddenly froze, as did Naruto, and a familiar feeling came over them both before a familiar. Era, you two aren't fighting again, are you?" The two men swallowed nervously before looking over to see a certain black bear sage, smiling sweetly, and with arms crossed, but her foot was tapping a military beat telling of her displeasure at arriving and finding the two men about to break into an argument, again. Clearing his throat, Naruto was about to speak when Aoi gave him the infamous, "Don't make me hit you" look, and he closed his mouth. It was best to not argue with her when she's in this mood. With a glance, the bear asked the goddess of the sun, "Are we done here, Lady Amaterasu?" Nodding, an amused Amaterasu informed, "Yes, Aoi-san. Though, if Narian would please tend to the burnt sections of the forests." Looking to the still bug form Naruto, Aoi informed, "You will repair the damage and return to the shrine immediately, am I clear?" But, am I clear?" Aoi informed, with her black eyes hardening to ebony orbs of, "I will hit you." That got him to nod, Naruto reported, "Yes ma'am." Her void for eyes then slid to the troublesome husband, who stiffened significantly, narrowed as she ordered, "I expect a full letter of apology from you to Lady Amaterasu and Yasaka-san for your actions, or else, am I clear?" Knowing better than to argue, Izuna just nodded and accepted his fate. Though, it should be noted that all the women present, which was everyone but the two sages, were amused at the sight of the most powerful sage being treated like a child. Burnt forest floating down gracefully, Naruto lands among the burnt trees and ruined forest and grimaced from the smells assaulting his senses. Man, Izuna really did not fuck around. Looking around though, he can see straightforward signs of earth jutsu being used, and so, he will put Aoi on blast when he gets back. Acting like she has the high ground here. She should have controlled the flamethrower if she was here. In that case, his special staff he had discussed with Son Goku about might not reach her fingers. Though, his eyes were able to pick out signs of several hero faction members among the ashes and scorched earth, their bodies charred or crushed beneath the earth and stone. That doesn't matter right now though, as Naruto takes up a meditative seat upon the charred underbrush of the forest and began to channel chakra. He will clean this up and then go back for his sword that is likely done by now, test run it and then let the others check it over too. Just as he went through the hand signs, the ground around him churned and consumed the bodies, the burnt trees, and out-of-place stones. Within moments, a new forest bloomed and began to reach up toward the skies once more, but this time he did not do it all the way. As he stood up, brushing off his black Anbu trousers and looked around at the insect haven, a meadow with plenty of wildflowers with scattered sunlight, before he asked internally, "How's that for a master stroke, Chome?" The excited clatter of his resident beetle caused the sage to chuckle as Chome eventually replied, "Perfect. I look forward to seeing what we find after some time." Naruto nodded before looking back up at the broken-up canopy, watching as the sunlight streamed into the new clearing of wildflowers and interspersed young trees that had replaced the damaged forest as he whispered, "Yeah, it's something to look forward to." His 6 wings flutter softly at first, spreading some of Chome's essence around before he took off gently and made his way back to the shrine. Hopefully, the insects will return to find their new home to their liking. Kyoto Mountain Shrine. Landing back in the garden of the shrine, Naruto finally dropped Chome's form and returned to full human with his blue eyes, no tail, and hands in place of razor claws. After flexing his human fingers again, getting used to them, he abruptly caught the missile known as Kuno. The small Kyuubi smiled at him. Kuno chirped, "Where did you go, Ni-chan?" Placing her down again, Naruto informed, "Well, Kuno-chan, we had a few people to meet and stuff. Just boring adult stuff." She huffed and looked away, knowing what that was code for. Naruto winced at the roar from his oldest tenant demanding he apologize to the kid, but it was ignored. How exactly do you explain a mass slaughter of human enemies to a child? Kurama fell silent after that. Looking back across the garden, Naruto watches Aoi swing around what he assumed was the metal core to the staff he had mentioned to her earlier. It was an alloy of Bijuu and local steel, giving it a sense of familiarity for her to use seamlessly. Though, once finished, it will be covered in blackwood, balancé, teak, or bulok. He hadn't decided yet which would be best to finish the staff, plus he didn't have the workshop to work on it either, and was only on the drawing board as a replacement for the one he shattered. However, right now, it is something he had just walked up to and confiscated. Blinking owlishly, Aoi was about to object when Naruto glanced back at her and stated, "Next time, clean up your own messes so I wouldn't have to and I might be able to finish my work." Chuckling nervously, Aoi looked bashful and slightly embarrassed that he figured out she was there too. Yeah, she probably should have, but the fire got all out of control, and she had to scold her husband and then. With a sigh, she nodded and mumbled, "Sorry about that." Naruto though just headed towards his smithy while twirling around the rod of metal, casually showing off his dexterity and familiarity with the weapon type. Stepping inside his workshop, finds Izuna, Tajima, Sasunu, Kiba, and Ravel leaning over as the heiress slowly pulls out a heated dagger from the fire pit with long tongs. The prim and proper noble lady was absent as her fancy hair was tied back and away from her face. She had smoke and ash stains over her jumpsuit. Yet, her blue eyes held focus as she, under the direction of both Sasunu and Izuna, began to work on the dagger with Kiba assisting calmly as if this was normal. The schoolboy too had more work-appropriate gear on, an old t-shirt of some kind, thick tan smithy apron, and work boots. He looked more excited than anything. Taking a seat at his workstation, Naruto already finds that his celestial blade's chakra metal had already been replaced by the Bijuu metal. The metal removed was now sealed up and in the seal on his armor for later use. According to his recently released shadow clone, he had finished the atomic edge seal on the core and had set up the chakra storage seals connection points for the blood recognition seals. Nodding, Naruto got to work on the required seals and began to etch in the remaining parts of the seal. As he works, a strange sense of calm comes over him. Like, all that matters is the next etching into the metal. The next scribe leads to a curve then lift up. Another stroke of this artwork and he finds himself in a serene state of mind. Even more so than when he worked on those pranks. Why is it when he works on his weapons that he finds it soothing when pranks were his stress reliever before? Tisk. This is wrong yet. He finds himself not caring as he finished the chakra storage seal. His best work to date, not meaning to blow his own horn or anything. A quick flash of his chakra into the seal to confirm the functionality. Bingo, it works beautifully and up to spec. Still, have to finish the chakra and blood seals, but how would that affect the Shinto from wielding it for the test? Finish it later then? Would be best, perhaps a second battery in the hilt, disguised as the Uzumaki swirl? Oh, maybe a recall seal using Hurricane. Should be possible, though it might take a few days to work out. This is fun. Seals and maintenance for his weapons puts him at ease. With a heavy sigh, Naruto finally stretched out and took note that Hachiman was standing on his left, back to him, as if a guard and blocking line of sight of the table from there. Blinking at that, he glances right to see that Amaterasu was doing the same but was intensely watching him work. Seeing his gaze on her, the sun goddess explained. You were so focused on your work, that we were worried that you would not hold back on your sage arts, and we were not so inclined towards letting others observe them. With a sigh again, Naruto nodded, knowing what she actually meant by sage arts, and having been so focused and relaxed that he lost track of his surroundings for a moment there. Looking back at her, he offered a soft smile as he spoke. Thank you, Lady Amaterasu. I owe you for your consideration, as I lost track of time for a moment there. A light chuckle from the Lady of the Sun earned an awkward smile from the blonde, but thankfully it was in good humor as Amaterasu corrected him. It has actually been almost 2 hours since you got back. Blinking owlishly at that, Naruto glanced back and saw that Kiba was now forging a blade himself under Izuna's instruction alone, a wakizashi by the looks of it. Revel was over by the second workbench with his son Goku clone working on handle designs made of thread and cloth for the twin short blades she had forged earlier, that were on the cooling rack. Damn, he had really lost track of time there. Also, why the hell were they making weapons for the devil kids? Looking back at his weapon, however, the 2 seals were actually masterfully done and perfectly ready to go. Perhaps he should reassemble it now and test it out before adding the rest. Nodding at the thought, Naruto began to do just that as he informed. I see. Well, I want to test this weapon out again and see how things are going before I add on the security seals. A blind man could have seen the glimmer in the goddess's eyes at the mention of testing the sword they gifted him and his modifications to it. She's just as crazy about swords as any Uzumaki, and that knight is by the looks of things, Naruto mused. A few minutes later, Sasunu watches as the sage and those within the workshop exit with the gifted blade in hand, looking almost untouched. Key word being almost, as he can see the thinnest of gray splitting the night and day parts of the weapon. He doubts anyone who wasn't a divine being would have missed it, or perhaps a sage. Or ninja. Swinging the weapon around felt great for Naruto, natural even, whilst at the same time he was filling the chakra storage seal to only about a quarter. No need for a full tank for just a test. Didn't stop others from coming to watch though. Haku looked up from her medical research notes from her place in the shadow of the cherry blossoms. The calm smile on her husband's face was soothing to her own nerves, and finds herself blushing, recalling how she kinda lost it earlier when she couldn't find him in their bed. She really needs to rein in her Yukiheim side a bit, as it near enough took over her mind that early in the morning. Log knows what might have happened if there was another woman present, likely would have frozen them solid without a second thought. Rias and her peerage, besides Kiba, were also paying attention as Seekvaria was sitting beside her childhood friend and her queen. She too looked over and saw Narian testing the weight of his sword just as Grafia arrived, hair still with strands of pink in. Gabriel, Aoi, Kuno, and the cubs all look over and watched him warm up and stretch out. The 2 adult ladies took it upon themselves to ensure none of the young ones got anywhere near the workshop to both Narian, with the occasional help from Kuroka, who was no longer snoozing above the Yukiheim and paying attention too. With a glance at his friend, who nodded and flicked up her hand, Naruto launched up at the rapidly appearing ice panels, and like last time he slashed through the first, then kicked off it. Before he reached the second, the stored chakra flooded the atomic edge seal and activated the enhanced feature. The moment blade met ice again, Naruto felt absolutely no resistance as he cut through the solid block that was easily 3 times the strength of hardened chakra steel. Performing a perfect trisection, he pushes off toward the third piece whilst activating his vacuum edge instead. Cutting through it like the last, but the fourth and final one, he channeled both the cutting and vacuum edges together. Only water remained after he finished with it. After several cartwheels, twirls, and careful use of the wind, Naruto landed back in a heavy crouch rather dramatically before standing up and staring at this blade. Holy log! This thing is insane. A monster of metal and celestial might. This should be banned, no, like seriously. A clearing of a throat caused the sage to flinch, then snap up at the impatiently waiting trio of Shinto gods, though Amaterasu had a brow arch. Chuckling, Naruto muttered as he offered the blade to her. You'll understand once you've tried it. I'll leave my modifications on, so you understand what I mean. Taking the sword, the goddess of the sun nodded as Hachiman supplied a few test dummies from seemingly nowhere. God stuff, Naruto supposed. It only took a single swing for Amaterasu to understand. The dummy had twice the resistance of a mortal body, and she felt nothing cutting through it. It was smoother than silk cutting through it, and that was somewhat concerning. 3 more strikes, same result before she dared, and flames ignited the leading edge, and the final strike left a trail of flames within the air. Amaterasu and Naruto shared a long stare after that. A silent agreement was made between them at that moment. That was broken when a 3-tailed vixen called out, "Lunch is ready." After lunch, Kiba leads Ichiei towards the sage and his apprentice. Just as they get close, he asked, "Menma?" With a twitching lip, Naruto takes a breath and glanced away from Kuroka to the 2 devils before he asked, "Yes, Kiba Yuta. What can I do for you?" With a soft nod, the still blacksmith-dressed knight gestured to his fellow. Kiba inquired, "May it be possible for Issei-san here to forge a blade and learn how to wield it?" With a quirked brow, Naruto regarded them both before he asked, "And why, Kiba Yuta, are you asking this of me? From what I saw, Natsuo allowed you to make your own katana, right?" Nodding, Kiba reported, "That he did. Natsuo-sama explained that my speed is better suited to his style and shorter blade." Upon seeing Menma nod, he continued, "However, he said that Issei-san has a build far more suited to your combat style than his. Thus, asking you now." Humming, Naruto glanced at the devil in question, and sure, he can see what Izuna was talking about. Setting aside the questionable behavior and character, even the hidden part of his subconscious, Issei's build can be adjusted depending on physical training to wield the longer katana forms. However, even the most recent engagement has shown that, even if he gives a pass to people, it does not necessarily mean that they will change their minds or make an introspective decision towards a positive change for themselves. So, recalling his earlier interactions with this teen, Naruto's eyes narrowed. Seeing this, Issei gulped, also spotting the rather hard slashing tails of the catgirl at his side, but paid attention when Menma spoke. "Well, Issei Hyodo. You know where I stand with you. I already have a student in the form of Kuroka, a part-timer in Kuno over there." He gestured to the pretending to meditate young kitsune, that thought she was being sly and would get praised for doing so, but her teacher was not fooled. Naruto continued smoothly, "So I am not opposed to taking another. However, you have 2 things against you. The first being that you are a devil. The second being that I do not trust you in the slightest. The last thing I want is to arm, train, and equip my enemy. So, why are you asking to be trained by me? What is your driving force?" Kiba looked to his fellow too, wondering what that was too, seeing as he too remembered what Menma said back in that clearing. That he has seen past Issei's dreams and desires to peer into the depths of his heart, which is why he lost his gear in the first place. That begs the question that was asked adeptly by his former colleague. Then again, he is a sage, so he supposed that was par the course. Then again, he also seems to be a true hero that he himself is aiming for. Ichiei has been thinking about that all the way back from the clearing. In all honesty, he really did not really know what Menma was talking about, at first. No, that may be the wrong way to think of it. But, even now he hasn't really accepted it, thus he finally responded with, I'm sorry, but I haven't figured that out yet. Looking up at Menma directly, he finished, but I want to know what I can do, and I hope that with some training under you. I won't train a threat, Pon-san. Naruto interjected without remorse, cold as his fellow's techniques, and eyes sharp as any blade. This earned a flinch from the student, a sigh from his friend, but the blonde sage added swiftly, as much as I wish to believe you could be better, recent events have reminded me that such naive thinking will only doom others. Naruto glanced to Kiba and commented, even you, Kiba Yuta, I personally would not train. That was a surprise to the blonde knight, thinking they were on better terms considering they had fought together, and before he could ask, Menma continued. I have seen my fair share of you Avenger archetypes before, and honestly, I'm sick of it. Kiba paled at that. How the hell did he know? Naruto added smoothly, purposefully ignoring the devil's reaction. However, Izuna saw it fit to teach you a few things, probably out of boredom I suspect. Just as Miyuki is giving tips to your healer right now. He pointed towards the edge of the flower bed, and surely enough, Haku was explaining something to Asia, who was paying rapt attention with a notebook and nodding every so often. Probably to do with the flowers around them. With that in mind, consider yourself lucky that he allowed you to make that sword. Menma continued, drawing both boys' attention back to him as he finished. Had it been me, I would not have bothered with either of you, as no doubt we'd likely be standing against one another. None could really blame him for his reasoning, and thus none called him out, almost none, as one Akeno Himejima decided to add her own voice, and she asked her not-so-secret crush. Era, Menma-kun. I thought you were going to teach me about lightning. With a weighted sigh, Naruto glanced to the unfairly busty hybrid and commented airily. Oh, right, I didn't see you there. She giggled sultrily that went completely ignored as he continued. However, I would admit, you are probably the closest to me training of your kin. But first you would need to deal with that large amount of hatred you hold in your heart. That stopped Akeno dead in her tracks, going blank-faced, but before she could rebuttal, Menma raised a hand and forced her to bite her tongue. With a sigh, he explained. Akeno-san. Hatred is not simply a frame of mind, but rather an unhealthy and unproductive state of being. Naruto was fully aware that everyone was keeping an ear open for his following words and didn't really mind as he continued. Hatred is something that can and will consume you. Feed on everything that makes you and unique. I know this as I have faced two separate instances of myself in such a state, and I beat them both despite our similar situations. Many brows raised, and he smirked at that, nodding as he explained. The first alter ego of mine was my inverse in every shape of the word. In fact, the name you use for me is actually the one he used. Naruto chuckled at that, recalling that battle and the man he considered his opposite, while all the Gremory devils remember his words back then. After a moment, the sage added. He was powerful beyond anything, had everything that I wanted, and none of the regrets I held. The key difference between us, however, is that he held a deep-seated hatred for those around him, and in the end, that was how I was able to best him. Okay, there was a few other things involved, but they didn't need to know that. Seeing that Akeno was still unconvinced, Naruto recalled the Waterfall of Truth and spoke again. The other was during my late sage training. That caught the attention of every Yukai in the shrine, none more than the two Nekosho sisters and the young Kyuubi. Though, Haku and the other sages glanced over at him, brows arched. Again, he couldn't tell them the actual story, so falling back on the whole sage thing is just convenient. Plus, his Jinchuuriki training did help later when it came to his sage arts, so it isn't a complete fabrication either, so Naruto explained. One of my trials required me to face my own hidden hatred, The hatred that hid deep behind my ego, buried beneath my convictions, and locked away by my will. His glance to Ichiei as he spoke told all what he was insinuating, and the boy in question gulped but listened as Menma continued. It too was me, but also wasn't. He knew me far better than I did, and our battle lasted for 3 days as we had the exact same skill set. Many shared glances were had as they tried to picture two Narians going head to head with one another, all out for several days, and the damage that would have wrought. It was shudder-inducing. In truth, Naruto knew he was adding a bit of hyperbole into the tale, but who's going to check if any of it was real or not? None could either, so he continued. In the end, I realized that overwhelming force is not always the answer to every problem. It can be detrimental in a lot of things actually. He sighed as he finished. In the end, and after I accepted that part of me, I had realized just how much potential that hatred had stolen from me, siphoned away from me. Naruto met Akino's gaze sternly and with the might of countless battles behind his eyes as he informed her. Hatred is a disease that weakens you over time and will only bring in your ruin at the end. I am not telling you to forgive them, nah, that would be naive of me. But clinging desperately to that darkness will only hurt you moving forward. He looked to Kiba, who too realized this was meant for him to hear also, and straightened up and stood taller as Menma finished. It's okay to feel hatred and anger, that is perfectly fine, but holding on to it, nurturing it even, will only harm you in the long run. Letting it go is the only way to move forward and grow. His following shrug did not break the tenseness the air held, nor take away from his follow-up. It is a difficult state of mind to balance, but it's what us sages are masters of. Naruto looked to Ichiei and added, that is why I have always said that I do not trust you, Pon-san. I have nothing against you, personally, none of us sages do, but you were a credible threat that I defanged. However, the next time you return to such a status I will simply kill you. It's that simple. Silence ruled the garden for some time before Izuna broke it with a soft chuckle, wiping down his ash-covered hands on a random cloth as he commented. You really are trying to make us stand out from the rest, huh? Like you're one to talk. Naruto quipped as Izuna shrugged, glancing to the blonde devil at his side, who had also paid rapt attention and was in slight awe. The Uchiha shrugged and commented. Well, this one's flames caught my eye, and she is clearly intelligent and not so bad. I was curious, that's all. That caused Revel to snap to him, eyes widened as she muttered. You think I can? Easy there. Izuna cut her off, shaking his head before he reported. Just that you are not as weighted with baggage as some of the others here. Way too early to think of apprenticeships or training in our ways. Just an observation, nothing more. Based off that, Sikvaria spoke now, drawing attention to her from the gathering to witness her stern gaze upon Narian, who suspected what she was about to ask. She did not disappoint as she finished. It's possible for even us devils to join the ranks of sages. It was Aoi who replied. Technically speaking, drawing eyes to her, she added incredibly carefully. It is not impossible, per se, as theoretically there is nothing exactly preventing your race from becoming one. The yokai all rose brows at the wording, though the devils present narrowed their eyes as Aoi continued. However, by your very nature, doing so will either be, how can I put this in a way that makes sense to you all? Yet her husband finished for her, Izuna reported. It honestly just makes no sense in any way, shape or form. It defies the established logic of nature and thus, will be infinitely more difficult for a devil to achieve sagehood. Though it's possible, it's also not. That was somewhat disheartening to hear for the devils present, though Graphia made sure to make a mental note of that and reported to her king. Again, their attentions were drawn to Menma when he spoke thoughtfully, whilst staring at Akeno. However, it is not impossible, considering a certain domain that the yokai and humans are unable to reach. The other sages all stare from their blonde fellow then to the hybrid and were somewhat puzzled at what he was getting at. What domain is beyond the reach of the common human and yokai? Internally, Kurama was the one to voice the collective thoughts of his siblings. That, kid, is an interesting premise. None have really ever become a master of yin, yang release to the point of sagehood before. not without the help of other factors. Shrugging, the mental representation of Naruto replied back almost casually. Again, it's just a thought and wild idea. As you said, yin, yang are an underused and unknown field of study, largely. A hybrid of both angel and devil might be able to find something of it, being a being of both. With a long grunt, Diedrich contemplated the idea aloud. I agree that, although the concept is known to me, actualizing it beyond what you have already shown me is unheard of. This is most interesting to say the least. But you are right about the hatred she bears. It will skew her yin far above her yang. Kurama added, still in deep thought of this idea that he himself hadn't thought of until now. The others nodded in agreement, though Saiken voiced her concern. But, if we teach her, won't that make her a very potent opponent? Without a doubt. Naruto confirmed with a swift nod, his frown tightened at the thought of fighting a fellow sage of yin, yang. Even more so as she has loyalties to the devil faction. It was just a thought after all, a very intriguing one no less, but ultimately nothing they were willing to risk investigating. It'll be fine, right? I mean those melons, Shikaku began but was cut off by Matabi, who was so deep in thought about this prospect that she missed the warning signs of her little brother's perverseness rearing its sick head and thus was laid to strangle him with her tails, then slam him face first into the grass below. All the others pretend to not hear or see the whole thing, as Gyuki informed. As interesting as it may be, we know we can't put any weight or trust in such a prospect. She is a loyal devil and will grant them powers that they should not have. It is a shame, but we cannot be naive about this or the outcomes. Everyone nodded as Naruto's attention returned out as he muttered externally, yeah, a damn shame. Hesitantly, Akeno asked as she was still under Menma's gaze, what is? Waving her off, Naruto reported, nothing, don't worry about it. He then turned to his student and asked, so, Kuroka, want another spar? Kuroka perked up immediately, then paled as she muttered. A spar, you mean, me and you, right? Not. Chuckling in mirth, Naruto nodded as he replied. Yes, Kuroka. Me and you. Who else would you be worried about? He asked with a knowing smile of faux innocence, that fooled the less informed but not the Yukihime, the queen devil, or the goddess of the hunt. As the two began to spar and train, Akeno would return to her king's side and together the two would contemplate what Menma could have considered was a shame. In the context of the conversation, it had to do with sagehood and devils, but his intense gaze on the shrine maiden meant that it also related to her too. Rias had noticed the confusion on the other sages when Menma, Narian, spoke of domains beyond the realm of both yokai and humans alike. The ones traditionally known to be able to acquire sagehood. This leads her to believe that there is at least one sagehood that requires something that devils have, but humans nor yokai do not. There are a few things that could be, but ultimately the requirements for sagehood are also an unknown variable. So, she herself can't really find an answer to that. If only she had asked her faction's alter ego, she may have figured out what Narian was thinking about. Kateria Leviathan had listened to the whole conversation just like everyone else from her place beneath the trees and not too far from Miyuki. She contemplated everything she knew of the sage and upon seeing the confusion of his fellows, started listing things that set him apart from them. It hit her suddenly when recalling his natures. Narian is a powerful sage, much like his fellows, but what sets him apart from them is the fact that he has access to both light and dark chakra too. He said that much himself. Taking that into account, that hybrid, a devil, fallen hybrid, may have a chance of harnessing those two natures in a way that none have before. Based off the bear sage's words, the chances are incredibly low, but present, nonetheless. Upon realizing this, no doubt that Narian too had realized this fact and was contemplating the possibility of that very notion. Though, what he considered a shame was her stand-fast loyalty to the fake faction. If it were not for that, he might have taken her on as a student and pressed into this new field of study, unlocking a whole new world of possibilities and way of life. Biting her nails, Kateria too can see where he was coming when he said it was a shame. It truly is a damn shame, as now even she is growing increasingly curious about what awaited such a development. What could they uncover? What secrets lay beyond that horizon? Satan, damn it, she was so damn curious. Looking up, she caught Narian's raised brow at her, and so Kateria nodded subtly to tell that she agreed with his sentiments regarding the shame, and he seemed to realize what she was insinuating as he nodded back before getting back into his training of the house cat. Damn, what a waste of perfectly good research potential. Just another point against the new devil faction, in her opinion at least. Dining hall. Sitting at the dinner table, Naruto glanced at the battered form of his student and could not help but smirk. It seems that Kuroka went all out and tried to pay him back for the other day when he let Matabi relieve some of her stress out on her. It was amusing seeing how driven she was, but ultimately, he had to remind her who the teacher was here. Seeing this, the black cat scowled as she lifted her head from the table. Kuroka hissed. "It isn't funny, NYA." "Oh, but it certainly was." Naruto reported with a sagely nod, and she scowled harder than before. He chuckled again before patting her head, slightly pacifying her, not that she showed it, as he offered. "Though, I will say you are getting far better in such a small amount of time. It's surprising you caught on so fast." With a huff, to hide the smile threatening to overtake her face, Kuroka looked away and snipped back. "Of course. This style was made for me, and I will master it, so none dare oppose me." Though, Hikari, the eldest of the 3 bear cubs, whispered to her little brother beside her at the table, "She's just as bad at lying as you or Taji." The others all chuckled or giggled at that, depending on their age, though Kuroka glared playfully at the young girl, who stuck out her tongue in response. This was what the 5 rescued yokai came across when Yusaka and Sei led them inside, the 2 kitsune having just returned from the main shrine in the city. Noting this, all the sages glance over as they approached their table as Yusaka spoke. "Evening all. I just wanted to introduce you to the women you saved. They also wanted to thank you too." Naruto smiled but also pointed to the greenish-blonde devil and informed. "Then, it is Seatvaria Agara's-san they should thank. I just blew things up." Yusaka raised an eyebrow at that statement, and so he added, "Okay. I blew up a lot of things, using gale force winds." Only Kateria knew the level of understatement that held and rolled her eyes due to it. That was only caught by Naruto, as he suspected she had witnessed part of his attack. Rias too was only partially aware of the fact, but her sensory skills were lacking and thus did not really see the results of his attacks beyond the massive explosions that resulted from them like the old faction devil did. Though this was pushed aside as the lone Nekomata of the group of 5 stepped forward, drawing eyes to her short stature. She had sky blue fur, which was rather unique, with dark shimmering eyes that were alluring to the point of being unnatural, even by the supernatural standards that Naruto was slowly coming accustomed to. Though, it also did not affect him, as he was not so weak-willed, nor would his resident Neko or slug allow such a thing. Thus, he paid attention when she spoke softly. "Thank you for saving us, Mr. Sage. My name is Fujino Kin." She and the others bowed formally, allowing Naruto to witness this Fujino Kin's 3 tails swaying rather stiffly at her back and certainly not staring at the cow's bulging chests that had to be. A pair of clearing throats echoed through his mind as he offered back, not paying attention to the pouts that accompanied the sounds, as he offered softly, "It was my duty. What they did was an atrocity, and they shall pay for their transgressions. I am sure of it." Raising up, the 5 all nodded with smiles when the spider yokai, from what his senses were telling him, despite her current human-like stature, stepped forward and bowed a second time as she whispered, "I am Nagamine. Thank you too. My kin are normally ignored, overlooked. So, thank you." Naruto just nodded with a kind smile, though if you looked carefully, he gave Yusaka a swift glance, that was caught by Nagamine and both kitsune. Suddenly, the Kyuubi felt like she was on notice for that fact and made a note to amend it during the next council meeting. The spider yokai herself was rather slim yet tall at about 6'1", long crisp ebony hair with a small portion of pure white beside her right ear. The black of her eyes seemed endless and consuming, cold even, but held plenty of unspoken intellect that told the sages she was not one to cross, yet also gave them thought to how she was caught by the humans. Perhaps she was laying a trap and planned to consume them all until her chakra was suppressed. Perhaps a ploy gone wrong. Something tells Naruto that was likely the case and responded, "How unfortunate. Perhaps, after dinner, you could tell me about you and your kin? I am somewhat curious about your story." He caught the slight surprise in her calm expression, that morphed into a soft smile as she nodded before bowing again. Nagamine offered in a whisper, "It would be an honor, Lord Sage." "Narian is fine," Naruto informed with a chuckle, though that was secondary as the last three tanned yokai introduced themselves. "Lord Narian, my name is Umon. Beside me are my friends Mita and Kasai. We are all of the Bull clan, and we wish to thank you for helping us too." As expected, Gyuki perked up and nodded, made sense to him now, and Naruto noticed his sudden attention and so replied calmly, "It is not a problem. Like I said, I hope you all thank Seekvera Agara's-san too. Were it not for her, things would have been far different." All three nodded in unison, making their likeness clear along with their soft dispositions. They all stood at like 6'4", maybe 5, Umon being the tallest and with caramel skin, gray eyes, and bright white hair trailing down her back. Mita was pale, black-haired, and black eyes. This left Kasai as the shortest, with the fairest complexion paired with brown hair and eyes, but with thighs that rivaled a certain Bijuu's human form. Said Bijuu narrowed her eyes at that last comment, not liking her form being remotely challenged in thickness. It was perfect and centered around a certain sage's taste, right? Oblivious to the potentially life-threatening situation within our blonde sage, Yasaka waved them all over towards the devil table and they all waved their goodbyes as they left. Though, it should be noted that everyone saw how introspective Naruto was for the remainder of the meal and how mechanically he ate. None could shake him from it. This it for today guys, this was the part 12 of What If Naruto Was the Jinchuuriki of 9 Bijuu X Highschool DxD. Stay tuned for more.